Okay. So thanks everybody for coming today to this artist presentation by Jonathan Herrera Soto. This is part of the print media program's BIPOC Open Print Studio that is a virtual print studio this semester. And I want to thank the print media program and also the Creative Citizens in Action at CCA for supporting this lecture series. This is the last of the series for this semester, but it will continue into the spring. So I'd really like to welcome Jonathan today and thank him for being here. Jonathan Herrera Soto's work visually articulates relationships between collective memory and historical instances of state-sponsored violence inflicted on politicized bodies through work that echoes the lived experience of those who are no longer with us. He uses a variety of print and sculptural techniques to reposition the subject in the world and in history to construct visual material from what is lost, creating presence out of disappearance. Jonathan received his BFA from Minneapolis College of Art and Design. He is shown nationally and is the recipient of several grants and residencies, including Kala Art Institute, High Point Center for Printmaking, Kimmel Harding Nelson Center, the Santo Foundation Individual Artist Award, and the Brown University Artist Initiative Grant. He's a current Jerome Hill Artist Grant Fellow. And again, I really want to thank you for being here, Jonathan. It's so generous of you to respond to what was just a cold call from me. And I saw your work and was really compelled by it. So thanks for coming. Jonathan's gonna sort of take the reins. If everyone can remember to stay muted for the duration. We'll have Jonathan's presentation, a short Q&A, and then he's scheduled to meet with a student who, if they don't show up, we can sort of just take a little bit longer Q&A session. So again, thanks for being here, and thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks for the intro. I just wanted to check in if everyone hears me all right. Everything's good. Great, awesome. Yeah, super thankful for the invite and happy to talk printmaking and art and the stuff that pulls me to make work. So I'm feeling very grateful and want to say thank you for the opportunity again to spend some time with everyone. Share screen. All right. I was just checking, so bear with me. Can you all see my screen? Great, awesome. All right, I'm gonna get settled in. And yeah, thank you so much. My name is Jonathan Herrera Soto. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm originally from Chicago, currently in Providence, Rhode Island, i.e. Narragansett land. And yeah, feeling grateful for the opportunity to talk to everyone. And I usually start my presentations with a little bit about me. And I wanted to share this photo with everyone. It's a picture taken, I believe, just outside of Six Flags when of my family. I'm the little guy down here in red, and in the picture, you know, you see my mom to the left, my dad in the middle, my brother right to the right of me, and something in this picture that I try to echo in my work is this duality that I grew up in, of being one of the only US citizens born in my immediate family. The majority of the people in this photo are migrants to the US. And from my upbringing, I was a witness to experiences, not my own, but very much felt by proximity. My experience since I was young has been one of bearing witness to politicized violence against migrants in the US, against um, uh, uh, communities of undocumented people, while simultaneously having the privileges of being a US citizen. And in this way, I've always felt like a tourist. This is a picture of me going to my first trip to Mexico, and I have all my luggage and all my like little special things, and it's a feeling that I have everywhere I go, whether it's in my art practice with my friends and colleagues, and not necessarily adopting an American culture persona, but also like not being fully part of the migrant narrative that my family carries. I'm somewhere in between, and that's where my work starts, is bearing witness to experiences outside of myself. As a student at MCAD, I went to school at the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. I had a difficulty thinking about what I wanted to make work of. And as a junior, initially I went in as an illustrator and transferred my major into painting. I decided to make a tribute painting to the 43 missing students that disappeared or were made to disappear in Iguala, Mexico, in 2014. I think this painting series was a tribute a year later, in that I would apply paint to render the portrait of each individual student and then wipe away the material in order to create a gesture of erasure. And it was one of the first times where something really clicked, like the politicized nature of honoring the dead, or honoring a time, a very complicated event, because this incident happened in the town where my family's from initially, Iguala, Mexico. So dealing with a complicated, yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're not seeing the advancement of the slides. It's still
Okay.
stuck on the first slide.
Okay, can you see that one?
No, there's been no change.
Huh. All right.
There.
Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, now we see you with your luggage.
All right, I have an idea. Bear with me.
No problem.
How's that?
Yep, now we see the image of you with the luggage.
All right, this is my family. This is my luggage.
Yes.
This is the work.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was one of the first times where I was super like excited to be in the studio and had the quote like drive that all my teachers were talking about, you know, like find something to make work about and really like be curious about it. And my professor at the time, it encouraged me to take a printmaking class because of the print quality of the work, the duplicate and the inherent ability for a print, like I say, you burn one screen, the ability to make duplicates, and dealing with quantity in this way. And I've never taken a print class up until that point, and as soon as as soon as I took my first screen printing class, that was it. That was like the materiality of being a printmaker opened up this whole other area that I was curious about, which was the gesture in the labor of printmaking behind the work, like everything leading up to the presentation of a final idea or final artifact. The wounding of making a wood block, or the acid that erodes the surface of a lithostone, the emulsion that gets blown out by the big hose thing with water pressure. These gestures of violence embedded in the themes of violence that I was exploring at the time, I felt like we're echoing each other. And I just like couldn't, what's the word? Pull myself away from this excitement. Even just being in the printmaking studio, surrounded by community, and being able to be in proximity with one another was super nurturing. Whereas as a painter, I would spend hours in the print studio alone, and simply being in proximity and community, I think opened up a lot of possibility, and I found nourishment in that, and in being close to other people and having other eyes, doing mini critiques, or just giving feedback. And all that feedback is super important, or was for me at the time. And the vulnerability of being in the print studio out in the open, kind of like on your lonesome, was really important too. But I kept making work about the themes of migration, the themes of what it means to make a decision like that, of what it means to be an American, making work about specific political acts or instances that have affected my own personal family. This is a portrait of my uncle, Tio Chava, who is still held as a political prisoner in Mexico, charged with crimes he did not commit. And I would go inward and then go outward and reflect the world back, using print media as my main form of inquiry. And as I'm still in school at this time, still developing a vocabulary of printmaking and a duplicate in work, and working on paper, and starting to diversify how I invite the audience to interact with the work, and being curious about how else an audience has access to artwork outside of absorbing an image or absorbing flat work on the wall. So I started making these smaller gestures and thinking about the audience as a participant in the artwork. What does it mean to, read? This is a piece I did my senior year, printing a poem in this very like corner of like a stairwell, and both the witnessing of the artwork and getting close and crouching and being down close to the earth, but also the other interaction of simply not knowing it exists and walking past it, both became very important to me. The audience is a component of the artwork, and at this point in my making, I really was curious and thinking about the audience completing the work. Like their witness, their absorbing of my work was the final piece. To my print inquiries. And as I wrapped up my BFA time as a student, I expanded big and started to think about printmaking and the audience's participation in the printmaking, both in the action and the complicity and the silence all together. And I proposed this project in between underneath, where I printed 20, I forget, over 100 images of political prisoners from different historical contexts. And the majority of them were anonymous, found in archives on the internet, in library archives, but also in their namelessness, and in the grid, continuing to further that anonymity. I think inherent in the quality of duplication, like the more the number becomes, the more anonymous the individuals are rendered. And I think incorporating the work isn't finished until an audience finds themselves in the midst of it, erasing it a little bit, a little by little, taking away microbits away from the gallery on the soles of their feet. And this is where I left off my my BFA career. And then you're like all of a sudden flung out into the world and expected to live a full life. And I kind of, like it was hard, but I went back inward and thought about my printmaking practice and boiled it down to its bare components. This is a diagram of a print. The A part is called the matrix, right? The thing that holds the potential of a print. Then there's ink, and then there's the B, the substrate, the thing you print on. And by boiling everything down into this A-B translation, all of a sudden I was able to depart from the print studio, from needing a studio to begin with, and think about it in the realm of ideas and practice. The years of 2018 and 2019, I started to apply and get these residency opportunities where I would travel to different parts of the country, making studies, making, ink, presenting questions and thinking about printmaking as its bare component, a gesture of translation. I want to read a little quote from this book. So it's kind of complicated. This is a book of poetry by Raul Azirta, A Country of Planks, but it's translated by Daniel Borowski. And he quotes somebody, Emily Apter, in the book, In the Translation Zone, A New Comparative Literature. And in this quote, Emily says, cast as an act of love and as an act of disruption, translation becomes a means of repositioning the subject in the world and in history, a means of rendering self-knowledge foreign to itself, a way of denaturalizing citizens, taking them out of the comfort zone of national space, daily ritual, and pre-given domestic arrangements. And I want to return to this real quick. So if the gesture of printmaking is also an act of translation, and in that gesture, you dislodge information, rendering it autonomous away from its matrix, away from its original source. So all of a sudden, you are freeing information outside of the confines of colonial history, of the Eurocentric lens, and it's free. Within, I have learned to use printmaking as translation, as an act of love, in order to some extent, free the people, the themes, the contexts in which I'm referencing and talking about. And yeah, so anyway, that's kind of what's on my mind. During this period, I'm making these studies. I don't really know exactly what something's going to look like. I find things on the ground. I find stuff that I cut up and put up against in closets and storage units outside as like bits of debris, and they come together as these studies. And then over time, they accumulate, and perhaps a collection of 3 or 4 studies all of a sudden inform and construct the beginnings of finished work, of a more fully thought out idea. And this is work that I did in Utah as a resident at the epicenter, where I used the sun as the ink, the canvas as the matrix, and my body and the concrete and the backdrop as the substrate, and continuing to expand the vocabulary of printmaking through materiality, through performance, through the body, through outdoor engagement. A lot during this time, in the way that the print shop would allow me to bounce ideas back and forth between other printmakers. Perhaps there's somebody over there that I can like ask a question or something that's on my mind. I think that those micro forms of collaboration I continue to have as an individual artist in the world. These works couldn't have happened without the help of a resident artist at the time with me, Dasha, and a friend, Grace, that lived proximate to the residency. And I think, yeah, at the time I was collaborating with them in order to create these new works, and using what I had, and create, and in that way being resourceful and returning to the elements, the earth, what's the word? Reigniting and remembering something I had forgotten, which is the connection with the earth is important to me as a mestiza person, as someone in between two colonial cultures, that of the American English culture and that of the Hispanic Spanish culture, both colonial, and somehow this re-returning to the earth, creating ceremony out of thin air, out of curiosity, creating ceremony in that gesture, in that connecting the land, the body, and words, and printmaking all together. Yeah, I think at this time, late 2018, I start to continue to unpack these ideas, and this is a piece made of water. It's a stencil of my body, and spraying water over the top and removing the stencil, creating an ephemeral print gesture that evaporates over time. And I think with all this work, I start to think about what it means to make a mark. I think more broadly, what is the work? The work being the thing that evaporates off the ground, is the work. The documentation is what complicating what it means to me to present work, and the idea of leaving a mark. And this is a piece that I did at Mass MoCA as a resident, using the very immediate the very immediate, I think, symbol of a person, of a body, of a human, is the thumbprint. I tried to get the picture for this presentation, but I couldn't find it for the life of me. There's this picture I remember seeing as a student where this photographer captured an image of a sink at a prison right after the sink was located right after the prison inmates put their thumbs on the identification sheet with ink, and around the sink you would see like the echoes of inmates wiping their thumb on the wall and washing their hands away. And that image has always like stuck with me, as a mark of saying that I'm here, and collectively over time, you know, it makes this really rich texture, this overlaid print. And I, yeah, I try to find it for the presentation, but I couldn't. But I'm bringing some of that language into this work, into mark making and what it means to leave a mark as a human. So this work I did, it's a stencil that I printed with my thumbs over and over again with charcoal. And it's something that I carried over into both earlier work and later work. This is a piece that I did in Grand Marais as an artist in resident, where I took images of mass grave discoveries in Mexico. I took images of them being excavated, and I ran them through a layered process in Photoshop and projected those abstractions onto butcher paper, and then individually carved out each stencil and printed them over the circumference of the gallery. And playing with that idea of layering inherent in the print process and using it to abstract and distort information, keeping almost like just the heartbeat of the information, the source of what it is through, but losing everything else. And I believe in this work and using opacity as a tool. There is a tether between the audience and the source material, but there's also this layer of abstraction that doesn't allow the full absorption of that information, which I feel mimics how we interpret reading about these traumatic events that happen halfway across the world to people that we'll never meet and will never know. There's a certain level of empathy and sympathy that is lost in those distances. And I wanted to reflect that back to audiences, and as an experience that I've been a part of and witnessed in my upbringing, and I'm curious about that. And this work was examining those complexities and how we associate with information and identify with information. I wanted to talk a little bit about about everything and how everything is art. And this is a performance I did in residency in upstate New York, where I took a palette with poetry written on it and printed on it, and I pulled it around a frozen lake, and using that piece and source material from that documentation, it constructs material in order for other pieces to grow and nurture from. So the documentation of this piece feeds into a drawing that is presented with a whole different body of work with a whole different context. And in that way, everything that I make is connected like a debris and hurricane. Like everything feeds into each other. Conversations that I have with my mom, with people that I talk to on the street, texts, like it's all connected and threaded together in this rhizomatic way. These are screenshots, screen grabs of a series called Love Poem Series that I started in Italy as an artist in resident at Oficina Creativa. They told me I could get away with Spanish over there, and my Spanish isn't even that good, and that wasn't true. I ended up feeling very, very isolated over there. I had a wonderful group of friends that I made that were residents with me, but there's this like feeling of loss that was super heavy there. And I started to make these love poems out of source material from different performances, from works that I've made in the past, from my runs, from my walks out there, and started to make this collection of my life, of an archive of little moments of my experiences. This is an email my mom sent me, and it's like the ingredients that make up the series, I think, is halfway outside, as in like accessible to the audience, but also halfway not. These are rubbings from a floorboard out in as a resident in Italy, and to some extent you'll never. It's hard to tell that they're rubbings, but also it's impossible to locate where that floorboard was, or and in that way where these words come from, and that's something that is really interesting about love poem series, is that it's this collection, this muddy collection of everything that is important. Um, and it's and this is a piece. So I exhibited for a while. They were daily studies, and I exhibited 64 of them in a grid pattern with reclaimed nails at the Minneapolis Institute of Art as part of my In Between Underneath exhibition. My dear friend and collaborator Martine helped with the installation by constructing these custom built wooden benches made out of pallet wood and wood we would find in the back of houses and out and like dumpsters, and reclaiming narrative in that way. Stuff that is disposed and rendered no longer of use, you know, gets thrown away. Just like I think a lot of like how the country does mimics that gesture with politicized bodies, that you're only as valuable you're only as valuable as your work, and if you're no longer able to work or be useful, you slip through the cracks and you are disposed of. And Martine designed them as pews. So when you sit at them, you have this inclination to lean back and to look up and be in service to the love poems in that way. As I think in church, we're in service to God or whoever is the topic of worship. I wanted that similar feeling captured in the gallery, and yeah. And yeah, so the second component of that exhibition was a revisiting of In Between Underneath from my senior thesis. I had proposed for this exhibition to construct to print 200 images of missing and murdered Mexican journalists on the floor of the gallery in mud, a mixture of unfired clay, water, charcoal, sawdust. The sawdust left over from the benches get used in the mud, and it's all in that way connected. And it took me a full year from the summer of 2018 to summer 2019, constructing, I don't know if I have any more images, individual stencils of each portrait and cutting them out by hand. In that way, learning this process of honoring and constructing ceremony, kind of like the work in Utah, constructing ceremony out of what you have. and for me in this work, the ceremony happened in the moments of silence, hours that it took to cut each stencil over and over and over again, sitting with the people, the themes of violence and targeted politicized gestures of violence by the Mexican state against its own citizens, and perhaps in this exhibition, revealing how those gestures are replicated in different parts of the world, specifically in the US, because this exhibition was in the US. And the print process also took a long time. So there's, I think now in my practice, I associate time and labor, moments of quiet and moments of work as ceremony. You know, like away from the galleries, away from everything. It's you, the matrix, and the work that happens in and the hours that are spent. And it's the way that I pay tribute and am in service to my work and to the themes and people that I talk about, is to give my time. So everything's handmade, everything's hand printed. And it's not something you immediately get when you walk into the gallery, but I always want to show a little bit of that background narrative. And yeah, so that's in between, underneath, and at the end of the gallery, I had these collagraphs. In the gallery, I had 4, but it was the beginnings of a series of returning to work on paper. Every now and then I get invited or get accepted as a resident in a print shop every once in a while, not really that much, but always using that opportunity to return to technique, to return to works on paper, to return to processes that are more within the traditional realm of the traditional vocabulary of printmaking. I'll talk about those 4 and a little bit about those a little later, but at the end of this exhibition, I mopped up all 200 portraits using buckets of water and time. And it happened from like 11 o'clock, from museum open to close. The moment it opens, the moment it closed, slowly inching my way across the gallery and inviting audiences to bear witness to something outside of themselves, always returning to that gesture of witnessing and watching something unfold that is outside of yourself and to some extent outside of your reach. No, however much you want to help, and however much, you know, like you're however big the capacity of sympathy is, you know, it happens outside of your reach. And I think, yeah, that's always, I always return to that, bearing witness to something outside of yourself, and constructing something important out of something that's there. This piece in itself, I think, you know, couldn't happen without in between, underneath, and to some extent the body of my artwork is that way. One thing is a fixture and is necessary for another thing to exist and manifest, for other seeds to grow from the soil used of another art plant, or always in rotation, always in relationship, and always necessary. And a little bit more about the collagraphs. I was a resident at Kala Institute in Berkeley, California, early this year. So it was like just before the pandemic hit. And I got to finish that series of collograph prints, where I use individually cut stencils of segments of poetry that I've written, emails that my mom sends me, kind of a collage of sayings and phrases and fragments of poetry that reflect the kind of work I'm making. I have a writing practice outside of my printmaking practice, and I use fragments of that and I bring it over, and reflecting the gestures that I see the shirts make, with words that I feel reflect the composition of the image. So everything's all the stencils are hand cut. There's no repeats. And again, like using labor and my time to be in service to the spirits and the ghost narratives that I want to honor. And I want to talk a little bit about the matrix, in that in this series, it's a total of 20 unique collagraph prints, editions, one of one, and using real fabric, real articles of clothing, and gluing them onto a wooden plate with gel medium, and then sealing them with shellac, and inking the plate once it's dry with intaglio ink, and then pressing it and printing it, I think 6 or 7 times to get it. At first it prints jet black, and then it gets lighter and lighter and lighter. So I have all these versions of the work leading up to the final print. And then I add all the stencils by hand, and everything's backwards. So like, it's super weird. It's like everything's backwards and upside down, not upside down, everything's flipped, because in printmaking, you have to do things in reverse in order for it to print right, legibly. And they take a really long time, but all the labor goes into making one print. And if I mess it up, that's it. It's like, there's no, it's almost like the time in the ceremony is what it's important. And if the image isn't, like, if there's a mistake, if there's a word gets like tossed around in this way, it's the way it is. And it's highlighting, I think, in that gesture of honoring, not duplicating the plate, it highlights importance in the labor, the work, the artwork. To me, is mostly in the ceremony that leads up to the print. The print is just evidence. It's just evidence of what happened the hours leading up to the image. And there's a total of 20, 30 by 40 collagraphs. And yeah, I'm very thankful for my time in Berkeley. They gave me 24-hour access, and I finished. I don't remember the last time I got that much done in a month, but I'm very thankful for that opportunity. I'm coming up at the 45-minute mark, and I just wanted to end on some new work. I'm, like, everything that I do is within the parameters of my medium, which is printmaking. And I'm returning to this idea of the initial AB slide that I showed everyone in the beginning. And being curious about the gesture of preparing a matrix to print. This is a Google, like, if you Google printmaking, like, it's a diagram of, I think it's an intaglio mark. So you carve into it, and it's telling you how it's print. But I'm super interested in this gash. Like, what happens here? What happens in the moment, in the preparation of printmaking? And what if you pause there? What if the artwork, like I have been saying, is the process? What if the image, the gesture, is the matrix itself? So in the days, this is a piece that I did this year at Santa Fe Art Institute, where I dug a hole, I think the day of my grandfather's burying ceremony in Iguala, Mexico. I mean, not Iguala, but my grandfather lives in Mexico, and he was living with family in Celaya, and he passed away, and the gesture of mourning, I think, pulled me to create a place where a body should go. But you know, my not being able to be present, this is my mom's dad, my mother's inability to visit, to go, because of her documentation status. I think it holds the body like hostage. There's mourning where it can't be poured into. So I took a shovel and went out, and with the help of the Santa Fe staff folks, I dug a hole for 9 hours. And to me, I'm unsure how to frame it within the vocabulary, the parameters of my portfolio, but I think I want to trust the process and know, and to trust that the gestures that I'm pulled to honor and to encounter are important, and they will make sense. And to me, this feels like that initial slide I showed of like someone gashing a wood block, like macro scale. And what if it stops there? What if it doesn't get printed? What if it doesn't get filled with ink and you're left with this void? And yeah, so that's where I'm at. Thinking about the matrix and leaving it incomplete, not realized fully as a printed artifact or a printed gesture, but just leaving it out, strung out. And yeah, I dug this hole for 9 hours and then filled it, and it's important somehow. And that's all I got. I'm a little bit over time, but I want to thank everyone for hanging in with me.
No worries at all, Jonathan. Thank you so much. I guess I want to open it up for questions, and people can either turn off their mics and chime in if they want, or you're welcome to like write into the chat if you have any questions for Jonathan, and then he can read them off and answer them.
I can't see the chat. I don't know how to.
You probably
I'm gonna leave the slides up so I can go back and forth. But
I can see the slide. I can see the chat. So if someone types something in there. I just want to say, like, again, thank you, but also I think it's so interesting with your presentation, how you like truly leave us like you finish on a question. And I love this idea of like, just there's this like curiosity in your work, and like you're curious about just that the questions that you're asking are sort of these ephemeral kind of questions, and that you're trying to answer them through this engagement in labor and process. And I really like how just this idea of like using the matrix as a metaphor for an inability to answer that question, that the matrix then is the question in a way, or something, you know. And I like that gesture. And yeah, that's not really a question, it's more of a statement.
Yeah, but, or something. It's always or something.
It's always or something. Yeah. Also, like this idea of like the work in so many instances as being like ephemeral, and this that the work exists sort of as a trace of an action. So someone asked like what we mean by matrix, and so in printmaking, the matrix is the screen or the wood block or the linoleum. Yeah.
Yeah. It would be, yeah, it would be the thing that makes the print itself, the stamp. Yeah.
Can you expand a little bit on this like idea of ephemerality in the work and like why it's important for things to like exist and then not exist?
I think that's that question has a lot of different answers, but some stuff that comes to mind is I think I want to put obstacles in my way to some degree. Like I think like artwork as an inquiry, you know, is kind of like how to go about dealing with a question. And a question is what is art, or what is work? So the ephemerality of artwork, I think, really pushes that to the forefront. Like, is the artwork the 1 minute that the water print is evaporating? Is the artwork the lead up, all the labor that it goes to cut the stencil out and all the materials, like a collection, you know, like is everything that makes a print, is that the artwork, or is it the documentation? Is an audience's, you know, like witnessing a picture of a work that no longer exists and imagining and therefore being with it, is that artwork? And often I'm pushed to ask questions in order to reveal more information. Often I don't arrive at an answer, but ephemerality, I think, is to me a tool to be able to diversify my work and to ask hard questions. Yeah, that don't necessarily get answered, but that I think push my understanding of what I'm doing. And therefore, I think an audience's absorbing of that information in that work. It also is thematic, like thematically tied. Ephemeral bodies, ephemeral narratives, stories no longer able to be told, lostness. Perhaps people that were once accessible to us in physical form and then rendered to be made disappeared, no longer accessible to us. And then you're left with this void. And I am interested in the connections thematically between ephemerality and the ephemerality of people, of their being and not being, and capacity to be both at the same time. Yeah, so it's for all sorts of reasons, and I think and those are two of them, I guess.
And yeah, Joy asks, and I think maybe this is also a little bit connected to that question of like, what is the art? And Joy asks if you could elaborate more on the importance of time and ceremony in the work.
Yeah, for sure. I wish I had the quote pulled up, but something that maybe I would like to share with everyone is that segment in Braiding Sweetgrass, where yeah, it's the author is talking about witnessing her dad going camping and witnessing her dad pour coffee every morning when they camped, as a gesture of thanks to the mountains. I wish I had the quote, but it's revealed later in that chapter, witnessing, you know, in her upbringing, the importance of that ceremony, of that ritual, of honoring, of saying thank you, of pouring over the coffee, you know, something precious, something energizing for us, and therefore energizing for the land. She later asks her dad, later in her adulthood, where did that ceremony come from? Where did you learn it? Where did you acquire the knowledge to go about doing performing that ceremony. And her dad answers, it started by like throwing out the first grains of coffee that come out of the coffee maker. This thing that made coffee, you needed someone to spill out the initial grains in order for it to taste good. And over time, this gesture gained importance, and her dad added to that ceremony by incorporating speech, by incorporating time, and I guess most importantly, in intention. And I think that's how, in my work, I think that gesture of pouring the coffee out as a thank you is similar to how I think about time in regards to ceremony, is that you're like, I'm already doing the thing. I'm already cutting the stencils out and spending hours and hours of my day here in front of these people that have been, and specifically in between, underneath, in front of these people who have been killed, or in my work, cutting stencils, and simply switching gears and having it be intentional, and thinking about ceremony and creating importance because you're intentionally creating it. This is time spent in honor. This is time spent in service. And it's just that switch for me in my practice is using what is already there and already at my disposal, and creating ceremony because I want it to be, because these are my tools, and time and process and labor are all already inherent in the practice that I do. So by bringing those over within the practice of ceremony, is not not all that much changes. It's just my intention is more sharpened, more focused.
It actually is a good segue into this question about your residency proposals, because someone asked like how open-ended or specific are they? And so I think, you know, this idea of like how you can frame that part of your practice as the important part, instead of saying like, you know, sort of relying on, I'm a printmaker, so like how do I find a residency that has a printmaking studio, or like how do I transfer what I can do and if I'm just given a room into this my practice as a printmaker. So there's a question that says, tell us about your residency proposals. How open-ended or specific are they?
It depends. I think as a younger person, especially right after graduating college, I recycled a lot of the same language in just describing what I do and what I intend to do, which is usually open, more open-ended. My intention is to make prints, but as you've seen in the slides, you know, that could be literally anything. So it's a little bit of both. I think as I've gotten older, and being in place, I'm currently in Providence on Narragansett land, and I'm here with I live with my partner who goes to school here, and this is the first time that I've been in one place for this long, and it has shifted my intention in seeking residency opportunities, in kind of like in the time of COVID, like how to make work in place, because like traveling is no longer a viable option for, you know, the world that was cannot be anymore. And it's shifted how I write about my proposals in my work. Whereas in before, I think the type of proposal I was writing was very open-ended, was very much like, just give me space or give me time and I'll make prints, which therefore is just like, it could be like all this. But now I think I propose with very, very specific, a very specific intention. With this resource and this space and this money, I want to do this project. And it really depends on what you want as an artist, where you are, and what's important. I think at that time, the open-endedness of my proposals was important because I am truly influenced by my surroundings. You know, work made in Utah is going to be completely different than work made in upstate New York, then completely different in Italy. And it required my proposal to be open-ended to some degree. But now I think, you know, like with travel not being so much an option anymore, being more specific about my intention and what I want the outlook of certain resources and proposals to look like. So I'd say both, but for a while I would recycle a lot of language from the five proposals would be ultimately the same thing, is just have, you know, like at a different place, you know, like it'd be different, but
it kind of
yeah.
The majority of 2018 and 2019 at residencies, which is awesome, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there's one more question if you have time, Jonathan. So Juliana asks, they say, I truly appreciate your work. I was thinking back to what you said about how you were in a show where they said you can get away with Spanish. And I think that was actually when you were in Italy.
Oh yeah.
And so Juliana, something along those lines. Yeah. So the question is, how do you engage with an audience that does not speak Spanish, but who you want to interact with your work?
Mm-hmm. Like I don't know. It's you know, like I speak English better than I speak Spanish. I not that fluent spoken Spanish. And I think, I don't know, this is the way I think about it. Like the way that maybe an English audience might encounter the Spanish writing is kind of how I feel encountering my own family. Like, I don't like, it's, there's this barrier. This true barrier between my family and I that is rooted in a bunch of stuff, culture, place, but also language. You know, as a printmaker, my priorities are, you know, the materiality, the constructing images and artifacts and performances, and I think it's like an audience encountering work that might not in some way be accessible is part of it, because that's my life, that's my lived experience of not fully having access to a culture that's not my own. So it's kind of mimicking that for an audience member. And yeah, it's kind of like this thing. The thing is like, what's important to you? And I think encountering that uncomfortability of that inaccessible quality of an artwork and encountering that and that being an important part to your experience and honoring that. I don't think I'm in a position to fix that or feel like my work needs to be accessible in every way, because my life in some ways has positioned obstacles of inaccessibility in, you know, with my family and my loved ones and with the world, and it's kind of part of it, part of the work. And I think there's an inaccessibility in a bunch of other ways too, like kind of in the love poems. not knowing where the rubbings are coming from, and it's a hodgepodge of a bunch of stuff. I think, yeah, I think there's all this other stuff that might resonate with an audience member that can be outside of language, and it's kind of like one of those things that it's okay if
Mhm.
an audience member can't read it. Usually, also there's translations in the didactic. So logistically, there's that. If someone really wants to know, they have the means to arrive at that knowledge if they seek it. Also, Spanish is like a colonial language, so like
Yeah.
it's like this other thing that I deal with in my work of like honoring that, you know, it's important to me, the Spanish, to be connected with my family and my lineage and my heritage, but also honoring that it's like another English, you know, the true language spoken by people and in the region where my family's from is not Spanish.
I mean, there's also just such an interesting thing, and like I have some close experience just from growing up in New Mexico of something that I see in your work that I don't know if other people see, but the use of the Gothic script and
Oh yeah, for sure.
relationship of that to like Cholo culture, and
Mm-hmm.
and how that's coded in some way, but is also like something that is like very European, that has been sort of adapted
Yeah.
by a certain culture in their tattoos and in their tagging and in like all of these things, and that all these different, it is really nice. And I think Juliana's question is an always prescient question about making work and the codes in our work, and the codes that are important to us, the codes that are important to us to be visible or invisible, or that ask our audience to do work, or speak to a specific audience, or shut out a specific audience because it's not for them. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
like such an interesting place to be navigating when we're making work. And I
Mm-hmm.
tension in that is often like, that's the good spot to be sitting in, is like sitting in that tension, to me as a maker, is the most exciting place to be. And as a viewer, a consumer, a participant in art, it's the most exciting place to be, is in that tension. I don't want to be told what to think, or, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't, it's never fun when you see something and in 2 seconds you can be like, oh yeah, I get that. And then you can sort of move on from it.
Mm-hmm.
Fun to see something and be like, I don't get this at all. Like, let's sit with it for a minute. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but so one more from Rebecca about residencies. This is a good question. How many residencies do you generally apply for versus how many come through for you? Like, what's sort of your success rate? And then also, like, what's your big dream?
Um, I don't know. um, I think first, the first question is, I think, I don't know. I think everyone, like logistically, or at least I do, I can speak in the I terms. I know that I think no one, you're not going to get everything you apply to. And that if you apply to a certain amount of things, you'll eventually like figure out, or I've eventually figured out how many things you need to apply to in order to get the things you want. So like, let's say you apply to 10 things and then you find out over time, over a year or 2 years of applying to 10 things, you get 1 out of 10 things usually. Um, if you want to fill up your year with residencies, that means you apply to 120 things, because this is just using like a very flat ratio. It's like, I'm not like trying to say go apply to 120 things, but like it depends on more so. I think the more important thing is what you want. I for the year after graduating college, what was important to me was to be in a new place, creating work, and knowing that 1 out of every 6 or 7 applications I tend to get accepted to, I therefore applied like more of like this much in order to get this much. And everyone's different depending on the opportunities, the type of like the fit, the panel, like there's so many variables. It's like hard to say like what is a good proposal.
And with generally, the more you, once you start, it's easier to get them the more you get, right? Like once you have 1 or 2 or 3 residencies, it's like they tend to get easier, and that's for a number of reasons. One, because you have more work, and because you're getting better at writing proposals, but also, you know, panels see this history and they understand that you have this commitment to it. And yeah.
Yeah, it's very yeah, like you said, it's very dependent on all these other factors outside of what you propose, as well as a good application. But yeah, I hope that answers it. It's like more so, I think it's important what you want and what is nurturing to your making, and what it takes to foster that for yourself, you know? Yeah, I think in 2018 to early 2019, I think I scheduled it to, I was at a residency every month. And it was more so out of my wanting to do that and knowing I needed to think like this in order to have 8, 9, 10 months in a way that I wanted it. And yeah, I think it's like what's nurturing to you for your practice and for your growth. Because right now, what nourishes my practice isn't that anymore. It's different, and your application strategy will change as you change. And you know, it depends on so many things.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan.
Yeah, for sure. No, thank you, and thanks everyone.
So I think that's about it with the questions, and you know, it doesn't look like Amira made it, and so maybe we can just connect with the students post the weekend, and I'll send an email.
All right.
Maybe you can just have a little back and forth with them if they want to. I don't, you know, people have different things going on right now, and the
yeah, for sure,
and all that. So I just, again, thank you for your generosity. Thank you for sharing your work. I was really excited to find it. I'm a big fan.
I appreciate the invite. Thank you so much.
And so one thing that I like to do at the end of these presentations, because Zoom is so weird, is if everybody can turn off their microphones for a second and give Jonathan a round of applause, that would be really nice. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Jonathan, I'll follow up with you later this week with the links to the presentation and all that once they get posted, and feel free to share that with anybody. They'll be free to the public. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm feeling very grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm grateful. Take care. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.